African diplomats are being evacuated from the Ukraine as the conflict continues there. Joining us now, South African Ambassador to the Ukraine, Andrei Groenewald. Ambassador, good evening and thank you for your time. Firstly, confirm to us the reports that we are getting now that you are the last so-called skeleton staff that is now moving out of the Ukraine. What is the reason for moving out? Do you believe there will be a hit on Kiev soon? Ambassador, if you can hear me there, I'm going to try again there. Why are you moving out of the Ukraine at this time, considering the work that you have been doing for South Africans? Do you believe there will be a hit, or is there a hit imminent on Kiev? We seem to have lost the ambassador. We had him there moments ago on the line. We'll try and reconnect again with the ambassador. Now, as the price of petrol is set for a record high increase from midnight, South Africans are warned to brace themselves for more increases as the conflict in the Ukraine continues. And we'll be unpacking tonight the impact of this. I'm joined by energy expert Professor Sampson Mamphweli, OUTA CEO Wayne Duvange, as well as economist Maudi Lentsoane. Gentlemen, good evening and thank you very much for your time. I must declare up front my apologies. We might need to come in and out of this conversation briefly because the ambassador is actually on the move because of safety concerns, and we would have wanted to just touch base with him. So if we are able to establish that connection with him, I'll quickly pull out of the conversation and try and bring him in. But let's get into the conversation tonight. Many South Africans are saying we were being hoodwinked by the finance minister, so to speak, to say, oh, the petrol price is not going to go up. You're getting some reprieve in your pockets. And now that reprieve in our pockets has just completely been stolen overnight by the conflict in the Ukraine. Is this something beyond our powers as a country, something that we could not have averted? Prof, good evening.
Good evening, Thabo and the viewers. Yes, the challenge is that we don't have energy independence. Not many countries do have energy independence, not even the US has energy independence. Donald Trump tried when he came in to say he was going to try and ensure that they have energy independence. They failed to do so. So if you look at the way we calculate the price of our fuels, we look at there's the international kind of effect because we are basically a net importer of some of these fuels. So it boils down to the fact that we're importing more than what we should be importing. We don't have refineries in the country that are producing as much as we would like to have. We have very few that are doing that. So anything that happens in the international space, especially in countries around countries such as Russia, that is the second largest producer of crude oil, for instance, following the US, we are basically going to feel the impact. We were very lucky that at this point in time the rand is doing quite well against the US dollar. Otherwise, if it was not, then the situation would have been worse than what we're seeing at the moment.
Yeah. Wayne, is there something that government can do, should do, that it is not doing? I suppose the fuels levy conversation, certainly this time around, we've seen it not gone up. I think many are saying it's the first time in many years that we have seen REF as well as the fuel levy not going up. And many were saying this is good news. But is there any adjustment that can be done to bring some relief?
Well, firstly, it was good news. I think the minister certainly heeded civil society's call. They pushed this envelope on the fuel levy increases for far too long, well above inflation. And I think he could also see that the fuel price was going to go up and tried to make hay while the sun shone on this very small amount. It was probably about 20 to 30 cents in the litre on fuel, and probably similar or maybe a bit less on the road accident fund. So I think he did the right thing. But of course, the international issues that impact on the fuel price, the rand dollar exchange rate is one. There we have a little bit of control, but it's a longer term game. And then obviously the volatility on the crude price, which is spiking at the moment as a result of the unrest and the war that is going on in the Russian zone. But what we can see is, and what we must know as well, is that in the past, when the oil price, by the way, was at $120 a barrel, so round about where we are higher than where we are at the moment, we had a much lower price of petrol, and that was because the rand was trading at about 8 rand to the dollar back in, I think it was about 2014 or a lot earlier than that. So, it's the international space right now. There's nothing we can do about it other than I think there's one area that the government has the control. He could temporarily turn off the fuel levy. That's about 3 rand 80 cents, 90 cents at the moment. That could be a big reprieve, but then that's about 7 billion rands of revenue lost every month if he did turn that off. But that's the only switch that he really has at this stage.
Yeah. Maudi, the timing of this in the middle of some kind of a expected recovery, the finance minister saying they've revised the growth to 2.1% or something of that nature. Is this bad timing? I suppose it's always bad timing when the petrol price goes up, but particularly when you look at what we are trying to do in the South African economy.
No, certainly. I mean, the timing couldn't have been so bad. I think there was a lot of, positive momentum already, in the works from the beginning of the year. There was a general feeling that, with the economy and the world seeing probably what was becoming the end of COVID, the crisis that we've had for the past 2 years, and that we were beginning to see, a positive momentum around the economy. The commodity prices were in South Africa's favor. The economy was beginning to turn the corner. And I think this negative impact that is coming from the, energy side will certainly have a negative impact. It will take us, take some of that growth away. The consumer is already under pressure. The cost of living is just increasing at a faster pace. You've got electricity prices. Now you've got petrol prices. That CPI, figure is certainly going to breach that 6%, the upper band. And I think you now have the central bank that is going to be caught between the rock and the hard place. You might start seeing interest rates hike as well in the coming months. So the consumer is going to be in a very difficult position, and no doubt it's going to have a negative impact on the GDP.
Yeah. Prof, the previous times when, for example, I don't know what was the reason and what was the rationale at the time, but government went to the retailers and begged them and said, please, don't increase. You must absorb this one. Take the fall for the rest of the nation. What was the impact of that, firstly? And I know the retailers didn't like that. It was really bad for them. But was that something helpful, and is that something that could temporarily be used during this conflict?
Yeah, the challenge with that kind of arrangement is that it always comes back to haunt you. It will always have an impact either on the retailers or on us as the end users of the products, because whatever the retailers absorb, government needs to then work in the long run, and in most cases, something that gets worked in the long run, it becomes a kind of premium for lack of a better word. If you look at what's happening in the electricity space, for instance, where NERSA gives Eskom less than what they require, at the end, when NERSA comes back with their regulatory clearing accounts, they're talking billions, and we have no ways around that. We have to pay. So somewhere, somehow, it's debt that needs to be paid somewhere, somehow. at a particular point in time, and depending on the timing of when we have to repay that particular debt, it may have detrimental impact on both on the economy and as well as on the consumers. Right now, as we speak, the impact of this increase is going to be massive. I mean, we just had the electricity price hiking by more than 9%, and now we have the fuels going up by this much figures. That's not going to do our economy any good. We're going to have a massive impact both on transportation, on manufacturing, the agricultural sector as well, and anything or any hike on the electricity, on the fuel part of things, it gets passed on to the consumers. Yeah. And that's where my colleague there was talking about now the impact on the repo rate, for instance. We are going to be in a situation where the Reserve Bank will be forced to increase the repo rate, and everything just spirals out of control in terms of the cost of living, more especially on the side of the poor, because many people always look at this from the simplistic point of view to say, when we say electricity price, the fuel prices are going up, they think about the motorists, the ordinary motorists driving to work and the taxi industry. They don't think beyond that to say the goods and services are going to be impacted. The food, the price of food is going to rise as well. So we need to look at it from the general point of view. The biggest question is, what is it that we can do? Like Wayne was saying, the regulatory aspects, there isn't much to maneuver. A government has already done quite a lot in the previous budget speech. But I think that we need to start looking at things such as electric vehicles. What does that market bring to us? How does it look? What can it do in terms of bringing down the cost of transportation, for instance? And we need to look at how do we deal with the aspects that can bring a little bit of reprieve in terms of giving us a bit of energy independence. Mm-hmm. I mean, if we start looking at things such as our own stepping up on our refineries, what will be the impact in terms of giving us that reprieve? Even if it's 30-40% increase in terms of the local refinery, that can have a massive impact going forward.
Yeah, energy independence question then comes into the fore, as well as how do we look at other aspects within the transporting sector to bring some relief. We'll continue with our panel tonight, Professor Sampson Mamphweli, Wayne Duvange, as well as Maudi Lentsoane. Stay with us. The price of petrol set to rise significantly in less than 2 hours at midnight due to the Russia-Ukraine war. And in conversation tonight with Professor Sampson Mamphweli, Wayne Duvange, and Maudi Lentsoane. Wayne, what happens in a time of a crisis? I believe there's something called fuel reserves. I know at some point we sold them for a steal. Well, we'll not get into that right now, but did we not build them up? Don't we have reserves? What are those reserves for? Don't they help us in a time of a crisis or conflict that is really not to our doing?
Well, they should. I'm not too sure what those reserves look like right now, but I think they would be used more in a crisis where the country really just didn't have, where we needed fuel, as opposed to needed to pay higher prices for fuel right now. So I'm not too sure what the fuel storage situation and the crisis harboring of fuels or oils. I think they were sold off and bought back, and there was a lot of corruption that took place there, as far as we're concerned. But I guess we've got to learn to roll with the punches on the international market, and this is where it's very important that we start talking about how do we strengthen the rand? How do we bring the rand to where it should be?
Right.
Because as I was saying earlier on, we When the oil price was a lot higher than this, we were able to have a lower price.
Let's hold it on then tonight. So when you were saying this is particularly time for us to look at how do we strengthen the rand, and I suppose you're saying that would put us in a much better position to be able to absorb the impact of these fuel increases.
Exactly. It's a symbiotic relationship between the rand-dollar exchange rate and then the international oil price. And to give you an example, just over a year and a half ago, the rand was at 18 rand to the dollar, but fuel prices were very low at the start of COVID at $43 a barrel. And so the total fuel price for us, or the petrol price then, was about 15 rand. Now we're at 21.60. That's probably going to go. If our rand dollar moves back to 18 rand and the oil price goes to $120 a barrel, we're going to get to 25 rand per liter of petrol. And that's a dangerous place to be. So we have to fix our economy, make the rand more attractive, get our exports going. And I think then if we can get the rand back down to 12 or so, where it should be, even lower, I think we'll be in a far better position from a growth and impact point of view. And if the oil comes back, well, then the petrol prices will go back down to the 15 rand, 14 rand, 13 rand a litre. But it is important that we get our economy back on track.
Yeah. Maudi, what do you do if you are the Reserve Bank governor at this point in time? Many have been saying the mandate of the Reserve Bank must extend far beyond just looking at inflation targeting, but look at employment targeting as well. And it's a great concern for many that the fuel increases are also going to impact on companies and possibly wages, but even possibly employment. Companies might need to be letting go of certain people. We've seen some relief packages, stimulus packages during the time of the pandemic. Is there something that could be coming from the Reserve Bank as far as rates are concerned?
No, I mean, it's a valid question, Thabo. The debate around whether the Reserve Bank should really be very aggressive when it comes to controlling or trying to deal with the cost push inflation. The reality is whether they hike interest rates by 5%, it's not really going to do much. They're dealing with a situation where the situation is out of their control. It's not a demand-driven inflation, but it's more of the cost, side, the cost side of the equation, where the energy prices, as my colleagues have already alluded to, they've risen tremendously over the past couple of months. You've also got a weaker rand as well. That's basically happened due to obviously what is happening between Ukraine and Russia. So I think temporarily in the short term, the Reserve Bank should hold the guns and not really overreact to the situation. We might come back in about a month or so. The situation in Ukraine is resolved, and the rand begins to recover. And maybe the oil price also begin to stabilize at a much better level than where it is at the moment. I think if they were to jump and quickly react to any sharp increases in the CPR, that would be a big mistake. That will just further put a lot of pressure on the economy, and it will not bring down the inflation, because it's not driven by the spending, reckless spending by South Africans, but it's driven by the energy price, which is out of the control of the South Africans.
Gentlemen, I appreciate your time. Thanks so much for joining us there. Professor Sampson Mamphweli, Wayne Duvange, as well as Maudi Lentsoane. They're helping us understand the impact of this in the dynamics and what levers we can pull on at this particular point in time to give some reprieve